Okay, I think we're now live. So let's just check if what's going on. It's not yet popping up on my screen that we are live. However, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us in our live stream this evening. Rather this evening, we are going to try to talk about the very difficult na conversation surrounding pageantry. Okay, so oops, sorry about that. Um, this topic has long been something that I've wanted to talk about and discuss for probably 4, 5, or even 6 weeks now. And this is actually a conversation that I had with Nailari of Sashes&Scripts, one of my mentors in pageantry. And we were talking about the future of pageantry as a whole and what is the trajectory that the pageant industry is going towards to, it's heading towards to. And one of the things that we have discussed is pageantry still relevant in this day and time? And because of that conversation, we thought that if we are starting to question, the relevance of pageantry and its position, its place in today's society, then perhaps the conversation is ripe to discuss about the industry as a whole, what is its future, and why do we believe that this industry is dead or dying? And I think that this is a heavy conversation to have, especially because we live still in a bubble that believes that everything is fine, everything is rosy, everything is still, in the sense of the word, everything is going smoothly. And I think this is a difficult conversation to have, especially because of the fact that on the surface, everything feels like everything is fine, things are going smoothly, there is a transition going on with pageantry. However, there is also a fear that we have been, not entertaining, but rather that have been at the back of our heads with regards to the industry and its long-term viability as a whole. Because it has been a very difficult several years for not only pageantry after the global pandemic ended. I believe that there's a lot of conversations that needs to be had with regards to how is this industry going to survive post the global pandemic issues, because it feels that up until this point in time, there are still areas that hasn't fully survived yet, or hasn't fully what's the right term, that hasn't fully recovered yet. And I think we need to, we need to talk about this difficult conversation before we move on to, other topics in this year with regards to pageantry. So I know this is not going to be an easy conversation for the most part. However, I do feel and I do hope that we all keep an open mind with regards to this discussion. Okay, so before we begin, thank you very much for everyone who's here, who is listening, and I do hope that before we continue and start our live stream, please join the poll that I've posted on the live chat box that we have on the upper right corner of your screens. So I am asking everyone who is in the live stream right now, if do you believe that option one, pageantry is dead, or option two, pageantry is dying, it's an industry that is in its sunset phase. Option three is that it is barely surviving. And then option four, that pageantry, believe that pageantry is still thriving, that there is still, a healthy future towards this industry. So I want to gauge what is your thoughts and opinions with regards to the overall state of pageantry, because this is something that will help me create more content later on for everyone, so that we can further deep dive into this conversation. So let's begin. I think the overall na tawag nito na overview rather of this topic, because I feel that if we don't discuss this now, we might get blindsided if suddenly everything falls into oblivion. And I think that having healthy discussions, healthy conversations with regards to this topic allows us to be able to traverse the pitfalls in the future with regards to this industry. This industry is a industry that I feel needs more relevance and understanding in today's society, because for the longest part, the tradition of pageantry is something that has been, a cultural thing for most people, especially here in the Philippines, where with the carnival queens, the Manila Carnival queens in the 1920s and probably earlier. It has long been a tradition for us to select, the fairest maiden in the country or in our respective cities, towns, and provinces. And I think that kind of, pride with the traditions and the cultural meanings of pageantry helps us, helps us understand yung fascination natin with beauty pageants. And I think we also need to have a healthy conversation on this, because pageantry as a whole has been constantly changing over the past several years. In fact, in the last 10 years, there is a huge change in the landscape of pageantry, that it has become more commercialized, that it has become a little bit more competitive than it was probably 20 or 30 years ago, and that there is an industry now that revolves around preparing pageant hopefuls, that preparing pageant girls in the respective competitions. So now pageantry is a little bit more complex than it was probably 10-15 years ago. So I think that is a healthy conversation to be had, because changing changes in the landscape of the industry is something that is been going on for the largest part. Okay, so first things first, how do we know that pageantry is not on a healthy trajectory as of this moment? I think it's pertinent that we read the signs. We need to understand kung ano yung mga signals that made us believe that this industry is slowly dying or is suffering. And I think there are five major signs that we can all observe, whether it came as a passing thought or it is an active thought in our heads. These five signs have largely been something that has in continuous decline from the 80s, 90s to the 2000s, and in the 2010s. So the first one that I noticed with regards to the declining health of pageantry is the erosion or the decline of big names who broadcast the pageant all over the world and its features on traditional media. So before, I believe that especially in the 1970s, 80s, and the 90s, large scale na mga broadcast networks are the ones who carry the pageant in their respective countries. So you have multiple countries fighting over the rights to air, rights to televise the pageants all over the world, whether it's Miss Universe, whether it's Miss World, or Miss International. Because I believe in the 80s, RPN 9 in the Philippines and Japanese television networks would air the Miss International pageant. In the 80s, I believe, and 90s, the British Broadcasting Network, or BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, would what do you call this? Would televise the Miss World pageant, and all over the globe, the Miss Universe is one of the biggest and most heavily televised events in the entire world. So I think there is that sort of dynamics when it comes to the broadcast industry, and of course there are reasons why there's a decline with the big name broadcasters. However, I think it is still a pertinent sign that we need to acknowledge, because before, whether it's Mutya ng Pilipinas, whether it's Binibining Pilipinas, or other local national pageants, these features on the winners are always front page headline in newspapers. However, nowadays it's only when big name celebrities are involved that it becomes front page news, and it has been largely relegated to news features nowadays for broadcast and print media. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the second sign rather is that there is a market shrinkage with regards to the pageant itself, and in the audience of pageantry, because largely nowadays it feels like only Latin America and Asia is the markets that consumes pageantry, and it also is very evident with the large large industries that is being developed in the Philippines and in Latin America when it comes to pageant training. So that is one of the things that I think is a sign that it is growing on certain parts of the world, but it's not necessarily growing in all parts, in all markets. So I think there is a discrepancy between its shrinkage in interest in North America, Europe, but in terms of Latin America and Asia, it is a growing industry. So we have comments here. Saldi Salen, I'll get back to you on your comment a little bit later. Let me just go through first yung 5 signs that I think is warning signals that pageantry is at a decline. Okay, so the third thing that I noticed is that there is a shift towards more localized sponsors compared to previous years, where multinational conglomerates, multinational brands sponsor pageants. Before, you would see Procter and Gamble na mga brands as major sponsor for Miss Universe. You would see a lot of multinational brands and fast consumer goods sponsoring pageants. Nowadays, it's more smaller scale or localized to a national or a regional level that sponsor pageants, that provides wardrobe, shoes, etc. for international competitions. The next thing is that I noticed is there is a big lack of A-listers when it comes to the celebrity presence in the pageantry. Unlike in the 1970s or in the 1980s, nung kasikatan ng mga names like Gloria Stefan and the Miami Sound Machine, they perform at Miss Universe. You have large names such as Tom no. Like Enrique Iglesias Senior performing at Miss Universe, and even even in the 90s, you would see like very popular boy bands and frontman ng mga boy bands hosting the Miss World pageant, like Ronan Keating in, I believe that was in 1998, and then we also had performances from Ricky Martin and Enrique Iglesias, at Miss World and Miss Universe during the time that they were like big names, and even Mark Anthony performed at Miss Universe during that time. So we have started to see B-list celebrities performing or being present at Miss Universe, or celebrities that are niche market celebrities, like in 2015, where Paris Hilton was a judge. He is not as popular as, for example, Lady Gaga, who performed in 2009. No, 2008, sorry. And other, big name celebrities that were invited to judge. I remember in the 90s, names like Vanessa Williams, nung kasikatan niya, and Jackie Chan, even Grace Jones, the fashion icon Grace Jones, were judges at the Miss World pageant. So we no longer have that kind of big name A-list celebrities sitting at the judging panel or serving as performers, entertainers in pageants. And the fifth one is that prizes are no longer as huge or as lucrative as in the previous decades. And if you notice, pageant prizes are no longer officially announced during the live telecast, and sometimes even in the souvenir books, they are largely glossed over or not even mentioned in some cases. So I think there is a very I think there is a huge warning signs that this industry is a little bit no longer on the rosy pink healthy side, and I think we need to acknowledge that, and we need to start discussing that, so that we are able to find ways to address the problem and find solutions that we can do, not only as a community but rather as pageant organizations, to address the steady decline of pageantry. Okay, so let's do some comments muna here. There is comments from Daniel P. Yuzon and Saldi Salen. So hello, welcome to the channel, welcome to the live stream. I started a little bit early because I needed to make sure that I am able to address all of the things that I wanted to discuss with regards to this topic. So pasensya na if I started like at 8:04 or 8:05. Okay? So, Sadi Salen says, good evening, Sir Jess. There's so much pageant nowadays. I think it might eventually hurt pageantry. Some might have the oh my factor already, but I believe despite that, more will come. I think Saldi may point ka. It's not just the oh my factor, but rather because there is so many pageants, whether it's major international pageants or minor international pageants, we hardly have enough energy to pay attention to most. And because our energies are so spread out with all of these pageants, it feels like there is a need for us to really narrow down the scope of which pageants we pay attention to. And this is the reason why, we cannot always be present everywhere for every pageant that there is. Dahil pageants, unlike in the 19 you know in the 1990s, in the 2000s, there were only like a handful, and nowadays we have 8, 10 major international pageants, and dumadami pa. So I think there is a really, a good reason why you mentioned yung umay factor, because it's not just the umay factor that gets us, but rather it's the spread out of information, misinformation, disinformation with regards to the relevancy of these pageants. And we always think, that more pageants mean better for the industry, but rather it just eats up on the resources for other major international na mga pageants. And even here in the Philippines, sometimes too much pageantry becomes too boring, in the sense that there's another one right after pageant has finished. So there is no investment on us na tutukan yung nanalo sa isang major national pageant, because there's another one incoming. So it feels like the emotional investment is spread throughout thinly, and that is something that could contribute to the factor na umay na rin tayo sa pageants. Daniel P. Luzon Jr. is asking, I am super late, I'm sorry, but I'm here now. No, we just started a little bit early, okay? So, ang comment ni Daniel is, malaking factor din yung mga controversies, nakaka-stress kaya umaayaw na rin ang ibang fans. I agree. And this is not just something that is, that is unique with the Miss Universe pageant. Miss Universe pageant, the controversies started just recently. Yung mga controversies on fake inclusivity, yung mga controversies about the ever-changing na eligibility requirements that is not necessarily helpful to the image of the pageant because of this, fake inclusion video that came out. All of these are things that, are very much burdensome to the average pageant fan. However, for pageant media, this is something that we have to report on. This is something that we have to acknowledge that this is happening. This is real, and therefore this is something that we really need to sink our teeth in and need to report, need to post about. And I agree that there are times that it becomes too much for the average pageant fan, whether it's the financial burdens, the leaked videos, video footage of internal meetings. All of these kinds of give us a sense that things are not in a good place. For the biggest pageant in the industry. So imagine if yung malalaking pageants like Miss Universe are suffering with these kinds of controversies. Imagine the extent of damage that it can bring into a large industry like the pageant industry, especially with Miss Universe being the most visible and the most talked about international pageant that there is. If you are going to look at Google Trends from the 2000s down to the present, the scope and interest of people when it comes to the Miss Universe pageant outstrips all international pageants, whether it's Miss Earth, Miss International, Miss World, Miss Supranational, Miss Intercontinental, Miss Globe, and etc. So even if you add up the numbers of all of these other Alpha 4 and minor international pageants, it still would not be enough to surpass the numbers in terms of interest with Miss Universe. So imagine if Miss Universe is already having this kind of problems, then it is easier to imagine that smaller pageants would have the same problems. And mas madali sa kanilang tumiklop as compared to the Miss Universe pageant who has long been an established brand. So that is one of the things that we really need to, we really need to acknowledge. Kung yung pinakamalaking pageant, the biggest international pageant in existence are having problems, and financial problems at that, you can just imagine other international pageants, much like Miss World, who for the past year and a half, it has been announced that it will be happening in, in the Middle East, and then it has been moved to from February to March, then it was moved to August, then it was moved to November, and then suddenly it's going to be a change of venue, and it's going to be in India, and then all of these things contribute to the fact that there is probably issues on the finances and the financial capability to host a pageant without public support or support from the government. And I think this is something that we really need to, really need to acknowledge as one of the signs that there is a decline in interest in pageantry, especially with the market shrinkage that I mentioned earlier. If a lot of us are hoping that pageants would latch on to government support, and governments are not as interested in hosting international pageants, because it is said that it is always at an operating cost loss for the national government. Then what incentive do they have in terms of investing in hosting pageants? So I think that is one of the reasons why we really need to sink our teeth in terms of understanding how these signs all points towards, a decline and a reasonable belief that this industry is dying. And once that we are able to address that, that is only the time when we can really sink our teeth in and find solutions to what can we do to address this. Now, of course, I think it's also important that we understand real world situations and how these real world situations have largely changed and help redefine the landscape of pageantry over the past 10-20 years. And I think there are 4 major contributory factors that we need to address and we need to acknowledge as parts of not parts, but rather factors that brought us in this situation. Okay. We have more comments coming in. I will try to read that after a bit. But for now, I would ask yung mga bagong salta, the people who are just coming in, to please join our poll. I just posted it in the in the chat box section. So please join the conversation there as well, so we can dissect the results later. Okay, so I will go back to the comment section in a little bit, but let me just first discuss and talk about the contributory factors. Okay, so the first one that really brought a big dent into the industry is the death of traditional, not death, probably the slow decline of traditional media and the democratization of entertainment and information. Okay, sadali lang. Because when streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime started to pop up, the landscape of television changed. And because of that, the way that we consume yung information, entertainment has changed drastically. And before, back in the 70s, in the 80s, when we were still growing up, our avenues for entertainment is very limited. You have movies, you have television, you have radio, and yeah, you have the AM and the FM. AM for, for lifestyle news and radio plays, and then you have FM for music. In that time, we have very limited access to information. If you have, a cassette player, a CD player, then you're probably a little bit on the well-off side. If you are able to watch movies on a weekly basis or on a regular basis, then again, you are, on the well-off side. However, in the 2000s, there is a democratization of entertainment. When we started to, diversify the way that we consume entertainment. Suddenly, print media gave way to digital. There was a time where key opinion leaders would have their own websites, would have their own, would have their own space on the internet. And there was a time where suddenly we started to be more social. On the digital world. And then before, we have AOL, we have text and email marketing that's happening. We have Friendster back then, and then it gave way to Facebook, it gave way to Instagram, now we have TikTok. And because of that democratization of entertainment and information, suddenly everyone has a space in the digital world. Before, if you want to go have news and entertainment, you just turn on your television. Nowadays, information is readily available in the palm of your hand because of cell phones. And cell phones has become a sort of a conduit for us to be entertained, to listen to music, to watch television, to know what time is it. It serves as a camera, as a clock, as a digital holder of information, whether it's music, whether it's video. And then suddenly, all of our, the way that we consume entertainment and the way that we consume information has drastically changed over the years. And because of the change in that sphere, the way that pageants are consumed also changed drastically. Before, the only avenue for us to watch pageants is through television. Nowadays, you can have streaming, you can have television, and you can have live commentary on YouTube for pageants. And I think that changed how we consume pageants as well. And in the introduction of Netflix and these other streaming services, the pageant industry was not able to immediately tap into the streaming service as a possible, broadcast partner. We kinda came into streaming a little bit late. And in fact, if you look at the way we consume content nowadays, streaming offers a no commercials na way of consuming content, and it largely became more accessible for everyone. However, our attitudes as the pageant fandom, when it comes to paid streaming services, is not as welcoming as we should be, because we would pay for Netflix. However, we don't see Miss Universe or Miss World or even Miss International and Miss Earth being streamed on this large, big, streaming services. We would see them in Roku, but Roku is not available to everyone all over the globe. So there is a need for the pageant industry to really make shift in terms of the way that they publish content. And if you see here the if you see here the finals of pageants, mas ano sila mas relegated to small networks that service certain countries. And I think yan yung isa sa mga areas na kinakailangan ma-overcome ng industry, because it needs to think on a larger scale, to have a larger reach. And I think much like the way that the Oscars or the Emmys is being streamed over at Netflix, I think the industry, the pageant industry needs to find ways in order to be more accessible in that sense. However, there is a barrier to streaming, especially for pageantry, because this now is the second contributory factor that I wanted to discuss, and that is the mass market fandom of the pageant industry. Because it's mass market, budgets are very much a thing for this level of the market pie. Hindi tayo, ang industry ng pageantry, hindi siya alta. Hindi siya yung geared towards the more wealthy and affluent members of society. It is mass market entertainment. No matter how hard we deny that this industry is catering to a wider a broader market, it's not. We are delusion to think that our definition of alta is we're part of the BC class, but honestly, pageantry is a CDE market, and we really need to start accepting that, because if you look at the profile of the pageant fandom, they're not the kind of fandom that would invest heavily and pay for streaming services. And I think that is one of the reasons why pageantry hindi makausad on the streaming portion, doon sa streaming na tawag ito na aspect of broadcasting their finals. And the I remember, yung experience ko with the paid streaming service ng Miss Universe last year, where the link is not, is not working. Nag-crash yung kanilang server because of the amount of people who are, watching the preliminaries, and then for the Miss Universe organization to suddenly just shift everything to their YouTube channel. These are things that makes the pageant fandom untrusting with the streaming services, paid streaming services that the Miss Universe or any other pageant would use. And that kind of attitude definitely contributes to the decline of the industry as a whole, dahil hindi makausad forward ang mga pageants when it comes to these types of developments. And I think there is a need for the industry to evaluate whether or not pageants are still worth the investment financially from the what do you call this, from the fandom na side. So I think if the Miss Universe have difficulty on that, then imagine other lesser, smaller pageants than Miss Universe trying to make a paid streaming service a thing. And do you remember I think this was in 2020 when there was a paid streaming service for the Miss Universe Philippines finals, where the pageant was pre-recorded, the pageant finals was pre-recorded, and you can slide through the episode on their streaming service with regards to the pageant finals, and you can view who actually won, even if the pageant, apparently the finals is still playing on these streaming services. That is another thing that needs to be addressed. The capability of the organization to be able to provide, quality na streaming service. So all of these things kind of like mashed together to create a bigger problem with regards to the fandom's ability to trust the streaming services that pageants provide. So because of all of this bad experience, mas lalong nagko-compound yung issues with regards to, can we trust these streaming services? Can we trust, to invest on other ways to consume pageantry? And that is why majority of the fandom would still be more reliant on the YouTube streaming service or the traditional networks broadcasting the finals of the pageant. And that is something that really needs to, that really needs to be studied by pageant organizations, whether it's Miss Earth, Miss International, or Miss Universe, because this is something that they need to do in order for the pageant to grow. Because if we don't find ways or solutions to the barrier to reach more audiences, and to reach more audiences in such a way that they are willing, to consume your content, then you really need to, rethink and redevelop strategies for your pageant to be able to take advantage of the things and the changing, things that shapes pageantry as a whole. Okay, now, the third development that I think is a contributory factor to the decline in pageants is that pageants have now become a for-profit organizations. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I am saying that this is a reality that has provided more cons than pros. Okay, and let me explain why. Now, we have to remember, pageants like Miss Universe, like Miss Earth, and Miss Universe Philippines at the national level, the Miss World Philippines, need to be able to earn revenues in order for them to fund their national pageants, to fund the franchise fees that has been a big contention as of this moment because of the bidding war for Miss Universe. There are rumors that almost $500,000 is needed to pay for the national franchise fee for MUPH. The number that has been floating around, rumor has it, is that the Philippine franchise for Miss Universe is around $400,000. So $400,000 is, I don't know, maybe around 20 plus something million in Philippine peso. So imagine that. And there are also reports from Al Jazeera that the Miss Universe has an annual revenue income of around $5 million. So you know that pageants nowadays has become more of a for-profit organization than it was in the past. Of course, in the past, it is a for-profit organization, but with the lack of large multinational conglomerates that sponsor pageants, then the pageants would have to heavily rely on other avenues of revenue in order to keep them financially afloat. And this is where we get more and more stressed with news about bankruptcy, about lawsuits with regards to prizes not being awarded to the winners, because it all boils down to the fact that pageantry nowadays has become more of a money-making activity rather than a sponsored event. So in the past, you can have pageants that is sponsored by the local government or the national government put to be held here in the Philippines. Like in the past, when in 1974, the Miss Universe pageant was held here in the Philippines, it was largely sponsored by the Philippine government. In 1994, the Philippines, under the presidency of Fidel Ramos, spent around 9 million. I have to go back with a figure, but they spent around 13 million pesos, I believe, in order to put up the pageant. And these are things that are, what do you call this, that are effectively, effectively helpful for the pageant organizations, because they have partnership with local governments to put up the pageant. But nowadays, with more governments being more tight when it comes to spending, they are not as liberal when it comes to spending for hostings in their respective countries. And this is where the Miss Universe in El Salvador was a huge success, because it is largely being what do you call this, being sponsored by the government. So yun yung isa sa mga nagbago na we have to remind ourselves that nowadays pageants are more focused on profits. And this is something that Catriona Gray have largely mentioned in her mega interview on YouTube with oh my God, I forgot her name. But it was just released yesterday. Where she mentioned that majority of of the pageant activities during her reign were largely geared towards income generating activities and events. And she would have rather chosen, if it was up to her, more socially focused, socially driven activities. And I think that is something that needs again to be reevaluated later on. Kasi meron akong masasabi on that point. Now, going back doon sa for-profit na organization, because of the bidding wars in Miss Universe, for example, the pageant is now at the mercy of those who are able to purchase the franchises, rather than establishing long-term relationships with long-time partners. And this is the reason why suddenly we are finding more and more long-standing national pageants partnering with Miss International, because Señorita Colombia is now sending their main winner at Miss International. Mexicana Universal, which for the largest part, when it was still Nuestra Belleza Mexico, under Lupita Jones, largely their main winner usually used to go to Miss Universe. Now it is being the main winner will now be sent to Miss International. Same goes with Binibining Pilipinas. And in order for pageants to to have a cultural and traditional meaning, they need to partner with people who have been in the pageant industry for a long time, because there is such a thing as a brand attachment when a large pageant is tied up or is in partnership with long-term pageant, local national pageants that have long been known for dependability, integrity, and tradition. So imagine nowadays, because pageants are more geared towards money-making endeavors, it is easy to have a new partner every year, dependent on how much can they contribute to the financial well-being of the international organization. And because when pageants become transactional, then everything follows suit, even at the national level. So now, because the national organization needs to earn money, then its way of dealing with their local pageants is also going to be more geared towards income generating and revenue generating activities. So this is where pageants will become a playground for those who have resources. Pageants will become a playground for pageant girls who have either connections or who have the finances, to put up a pageant campaign. And that is where, it starts to be a question of quality girls versus girls who have the resources, girls who have the how to say this, girls who have the capability to mount up a national campaign. And because of that, the quality of the girls will not be as healthy or as high as if you have a competition that is largely being sponsored by the organization. So this is where I believe a good case of comparison would be Binibining Pilipinas and Miss Universe Philippines. With Miss Universe Philippines, you need to have a AP or an associate partner to sponsor, to help you mount your pageant campaign. If you don't have a very wealthy AP, then you need to be reliant on the AP's connection with the local government to fund your campaign, or you need to bring money out of pocket. And that is a sore contention, because now it becomes more of a competition on who has the better resources, rather than unlike in Binibini, where the shoots are sponsored by the BPCI. They have their own photographer. They have their own glam team to put up all of these shoots and all of these different glam shots, evening gown and swimsuit glam shots. Then the playing field at Binibining Pilipinas is a little bit less with regards to the financial investment on the candidate's part. So this changes the dynamic of how competitions are being held. And when pageants become more of a for-profit organizations, it changes fundamentally how the game is played. And it will not be the best. I don't think, this is a personal opinion, I don't think that the competition now is on who is the best candidate, but rather who is the best candidate with the resources. And those are two different dynamics when it comes to finding a potential winner. So there is one more point that I want to discuss with regards to this topic, but I want to go first muna doon sa poll natin and doon sa comment section. Okay? Currently, wow, there is 48% of you guys who believe that pageantry is barely surviving. 39% believes that pageantry is dying. 13% believes that pageantry is still thriving, and 0% basically there's no votes saying that pageantry is dead. Okay, now let's go over the comment section. Okay, so ang daming comments. I think it's let's start first with yung mga comments ni AJC 8604. One of the Indonesian pageant fans debated me about MGI's lack of mainstream TV telecast. Should all pageants be shifted to all streaming? Not necessarily, AJ. I think that it helps that there is different avenues to air yung finals ng mga pageants, but ultimately I think the more the better question to ask is, why aren't pageants investing on the bigger streaming services, or why aren't they investing on other ways to reach more audiences? Because visibility is key at this point in time, and I think to be successful, you have to be present in multiple platforms, not just the traditional television broadcasts, but also streaming, whether it's streaming on social media channels or streaming via paid platforms. Where the audience is, you have to chase the audiences on what platform do they consume pageantry. If it happens that they are on social media channels, then you have to cater to that segment. At hindi yung you only have one avenue for your finals. Okay. Two, there's another comment here from AJC. Nalulugi ba ang mga TV networks kagaya ng GMA, TV5, A to Z kapag inere ang Miss World at MGI kahit maraming bansa ang bumibili ng Miss World telecast sa kabila ng boring na format? I haven't seen the actual numbers when it comes to the Miss World and how many television stations all over the world are still broadcasting the pageant. I think we need to look and deep dive on that first, because compared, I believe, to the past, the Miss World is no longer being telecast live in England, in the United Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken. So that is something that we really need to take a look at. Okay? But in terms of yung kung nalulugi ba ang GMA, TV5, and A to Z and other networks, it all depends on the sponsors. It all depends on the airtime and how much of that airtime is being bought by commercial spots. And nowadays kasi, when it comes to supremacy, when it comes to pageant broadcasts, I personally feel that most of us are more interested with Binibining Pilipinas, Miss Universe Philippines, and other local pageants compared to Miss World itself. For the longest time, I believe na nasuya na ang mga Filipino pageant fans when it comes to Miss World and MGI. So perhaps that is a contributory factor why these pageants are never aired live on television here in the Philippines. Okay? Beyond the Scrub says, nakahabol ako, kakalabas ko lang sa work, Sir Jason. To be honest, pageantry is not really big in the USA. I agree. And even in the European countries, it is not a huge of an industry. Sabi ni Beyond the Scrubs, I feel like para lang siyang Super Bowl, papanoorin lang siya sa primetime kapag labanan na. That is a keen observation. I am not fully aware on the attitudes of the American audiences when it comes to pageantry versus Super Bowl. However, I do know that for the longest time, since I believe 2013, pageantry in the US, especially the Miss Universe viewership in the US, have in a steady decline. There was a time that the pageant was at an all-time high in the time of Donald Trump in the 2000s. I believe it was around 2006 or 2004. And then from 2010 to present, it has steadily lost viewership, to the point na there was a time na nasa 7 million na lang yung nanonood sa kanya in the US, when there was a time that 23 million would watch the Miss Universe finals live on TV. So I think that is a keen observation. I think that is something that is a reality that's happening now when it comes to the pageants in the US. Okay. Nasa na ba tayo? Let's read this comment from Bella Maylene Nepomuceno. Good day, Sir Jess. Watching from England po. Fees of streaming is a bit expensive, plus depends on when you are in the world. So I think that is also, again, one of the barriers when it comes to, streaming services for pageantry. And I think because the audience for the pageants, for pageantry, is not as affluent as it thinks it has, it doesn't make sense that we have this exorbitant prices when it comes to tickets for pageants. I think the more democratic the figures are when it comes to pageant tickets for live streams and fees, then the more that we are able to to capitalize on the what do you call this on the visibility sana ng mga pageants. And I do hope that there comes a time in the future where we become more invested, not only emotionally with pageants, but also we become more financially invested with the health of pageants as well. Okay, nasa na ba tayo? Waikike says, hello, magiging possible na rin po na magkaroon ng franchise ang local region ng isang country to join the actual Miss Universe competition like in the case of Miss Universe Persia? That is a question that I cannot fully answer at this moment, because from my perspective, I think that if you are able to buy the franchise for Miss Universe, you need to have a certain level of authority in your country, because you cannot just open a franchise in in your country without support from the government. Kasi, like for example, with Miss Universe Saudi Arabia, if the government suddenly says that we don't want our girls to be competing at the swimsuit competition for this competition, they can just do so, because they have the morality police to impose yung mga fines with regards to those kinds of things. And this is also I think a reason why pageantry, especially in the Middle East, is going to have a lot of barriers. I think natanong din kasama dito sa katanungan ni AJC with regards to Miss Universe Saudi Arabia, na suddenly naglabas ang Miss Universe organization ng circular, ng memo, that they are not affiliated with them. So I think before we entertain yung yung possibility na mag-branch out yung mga regional na mga pageants, we really have to think first and foremost on the long-term viability of these pageants in these regions. Kasi more than one-time participation, you would want that if you're going to invest your brand to a national pageant, you want to see the long-term longevity and financial health of these organizations first. So there. AJC is asking, do you think airing the pageant on mainstream television is now outdated? No, I think that it is still important. What I am trying to say in this live stream is that the organizations, pageant organizations, regardless of there are small, minor international pageants or major international pageants, regardless if they are the Miss Eco International or the Miss Universe, Miss World, Miss Earth na mga pageants, they need to find multiple ways to reach their audiences. If they needed to have their audiences be reached through mainstream television, through YouTube live stream or other social media platforms, through streaming networks like Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., then they have to do so. because right now, as I mentioned earlier, the market that consumes pageantry is constantly shrinking, and right now it's just I think the countries that keeps the interest for pageantry alive is Asia and Latin America. So why not find ways in order to make it more democratic yung pag-review ng mga finals, ng mga preliminaries, ng mga pageants, in order for more people to be able to, reach and understand and see, their pageants. We need to invest on visibility, especially the organizations need to invest on ways to reach their audiences so that those audience don't constantly shrink and die down. Okay, I am not saying that mainstream television is outdated. I think that it's still important because mainstream television for those who are living in remote areas might be more accessible than, let's say, social media if there are no networks that can reach them, because there are still parts and portions of the country na walang signal, and the only way that they can consume pageants is through television, for example, or through radio broadcasts, for example. So these are the things that pageant organizations need to think of and invest on. Okay? Pageant Fan NYC is here. Sabi niya, hi sir, I think pageantry is thriving, not dying. Situation worsened by pandemic too. Yes, will still live on as long as pageant has high viewers. On my end, I feel that this is, alam niyo yung mga may sakit, mga terminal na mga may sakit, na there is a sudden burst of life in them. And I know this feeling because I experienced that with my mom. When she was on her last stages of her ovarian cancer, there was a moment in the last 2 years of her life na mas may fight siya, mas may, mas alive siya. And we thought that, things are going to get better until it got worse. I feel that same thing happening right now with pageantry. That this is the last hurrah ng pageantry before it fades into oblivion. And I want to address this now because I think there is still time to save this industry. So I honestly feel that despite this doomsday feeling na the industry is in a decline, we need to learn as an industry as a whole to pivot. That we need to find ways to make things work, to adapt to these changes, because I believe, honestly, that we were slow to progress when it comes to the when it comes to the social changes, societal changes that is happening. I feel that all of these changes in marriage eligibility, in terms of age eligibility, should have happened during the IMG era. Should have happened when the time where they started allowing transgender women to compete at Miss Universe in 2012. I think the years of 2015, 16, 17, 18, those are the years that should have been the years that all of these changes in Miss Universe eligibility should have taken place. Because if they had done that in those years, a lot of pageant systems would have followed suit. Because right now, ngayon pa lang, nag-i-start na sumunod yung mga ibang mga pageants when it comes to the very liberal and very leftist na leaning, progressive na attitudes ng Miss Universe pageant. And I know it's unfair that the Miss Universe pageant is being singled out But because the Miss Universe pageant is the biggest international pageant, bar none, anything that it will do is a pioneering act. So I think that is something that that we should digest. Had all of these changes happened, earlier, maybe 5 years earlier than now. Kasi I feel that right now nahuli na tayo doon sa progressive societal change na hinihingi ng taong ito, ng audiences na gustong iserve ng Miss Universe organization. Okay? Nasa na ba tayo? Wait. Tapos na tayo sa comment ni Pageant Fan NYC. Daniel P. Yuzon says, Sir Jason, factor din kaya yung quality ng girl na nananalo? Kasi dati patok na patok sa Miss Universe, especially if ang winner is talagang Diyosa. I kinda have to agree and disagree at the same time with that. Or perhaps, reframe this as pageants nowadays need to find a balance between a girl who is commercial, who is commercially beautiful, somebody who na kayang magbenta ng skincare, kayang magbenta ng fashion, kayang magbenta ng gadgets and technology, versus someone who is also socially relevant in terms of the social causes, the social projects that the girl is trying to promote. And I think dito medyo kapos ang mga pageants nowadays, because pageants are so much focused on surviving financially that they are not giving justice to the reigns of their winners. Case in point, yung nabanggit ni Katrio na about her experience at Miss Universe, where she would have wanted more social causes to be tackled during her reign as Miss Universe, but instead, because the Miss Universe organization was probably struggling financially during her time, the focus is split between making the Miss Universe winner, happy with her reign, versus, making sure that the company stays viable financially. So I think there is, a balancing act between that. So when it comes to, to a winner, it's not just about intelligence or relevance anymore, but a balance of being socially relevant, being, able to communicate and inspire, and also, being a standard, not a standard, being a beacon of what normal people can aspire to be, or a role model that they can emulate in terms of the way that they speak, they present themselves, and etc. So I think kapag pinagsama-sama mo yun with one winner, I think you will have a formula for success. So I think it's more of that. Rob Bell says, I like the way you tackle the discussion. It's sensible and so intellectually superb. Unlike other vloggers who's even the grammar and incorrect yet trying to speak English. Rob, it's not about being able to speak perfect English, because even on my own, I still have some grammatical lapses every now and then. And also, I still am not able to conquer my stutter, and this has been, a contention for a lot of my bashers and haters. A lot of, critiques about my and what do you call this? Mannerisms. And I think this is something that I'm still trying to conquer myself. I'm not by any means perfect when it comes to, to speaking in public, but I do try to make the discussions on my live streams sensible and intelligent, because I think I owe it to the viewing public, the people who consume my content, that I provide them with a perspective that not other vloggers can easily adapt or easily provide. And this has come with my experience as a professional, as an educator, as a retail specialist, as someone who has lived, retail and fashion, both here and abroad. And I think all of these personal life experiences, whether it's good or bad, have given me a unique perspective on things. So thank you for the compliment. However, I believe, still in the process of, progress and personal improvement. Um, Daniel P. Yuson Jr. says, then, nung nag-focus na ang intelligence ng MU, parang nawalan na ng amor ang ibang pageant fans. I think it's more than that. I think it's just the fact that there are so many controversies that happened with Miss Universe lately that it becomes bitter to taste. And I think this is not something new, because in the past, when the Miss World organization had multiple scandals, like their winner was more concerned about her dating life rather than her duties as responsibilities as Miss World, or a Miss World that was crowned today and then within 24 hours surrendered her crown, a Miss World who was dethroned because it was found that she is a mother and has a kid. So I mean, all of those stuff also, kind of became detrimental to the image of the Miss World pageant. So it's not unique to Miss Universe that they are having these problems, these scandals and controversies. Every pageant has that case and scenario where its integrity or its image is being questioned. Okay? Nasa na ba tayo? Sabi ni Fortita, how to save? You think making it a completely reality show can help? Yung BBP naman, parang out of leisure lang ginagawa ng Aranetas. They don't feel any pressure right now. Okay, I think let's start with, with the main pain point of pageantry. Because I think if we are going to discuss and summarize everything that I have mentioned earlier, I think the main pain point here of pageantry is that it has lost its relevance in today's society. I think that there is a need to answer, why do we still need pageants these days? So the problem with pageantry is that it has, for some reason, kind of lost its raison d'etre or raison d'etre. I don't know how to pronounce it in French, but it is essentially a question of what is the reason for its existence. Pageantry may be said there's still, it's still relevant because of the social causes, charity, etc., etc. But there are still a number of charitable organizations that can address that without having to have women paraded in swimsuits or in evening gowns. So we really need to focus on finding that answer to that question: why do we still need pageants nowadays? Because if we are able to define clearly why we are still relevant, why pageantry is still needed in this society, then that is when we are able to find our true north and guide all our decisions for whatever question, challenges that comes our way. We are always guided by the reason for being, by our reason for being, and that is what guides us through difficult times. And when the entire world is asking why is there still a need for pageantry to exist nowadays, I think we need, as an industry and pageants as a whole, to be able to address that. And I think it is still a pertinent conversation that when it comes to the industries all over the world, pageantry is still the only one platform and industry where women's voices are heard. And I think that is something potent. That is something that is very essential to the existence of pageantry nowadays. If we are able to find our you know our relevance from that point of view and expound it, enrich it, then I think pageantry will not just survive, but it would rather thrive, especially with the changing dynamics in society in these days. I think ang pinaka problema kasi ng pageantry is the struggle to be relevant and the struggle to remain relevant in ever changing landscape of society, of culture, of tradition. And I think this is largely something that only the pageant community, together with the pageant organizations, can really dig and address and enrich and define. So if we are able to to do all of that, then we will be able to say with full confidence that pageants are still relevant because it is a platform for women, and it is a platform that women can use to advance their careers on business, on entrepreneurship, on science, on entertainment, etc. So if we are able to find that reason for being all over again, then I think that would solve our problem on this on this industry that is barely surviving, as 49% of you is has voted on. Okay, so let's read some more comments before we close our conversation on this. So, nasa na ba tayo? Waikiki says, I wonder po why Miss World is crowning enough women of color or African descent, although noong 2019, pero sporadic lang when it comes to African countries dahil po sa Africa's low economic condition. I think Miss World has been pretty much like Miss Universe when it comes to crowning countries, because Miss World has been more, I won't say biased, but a little bit more leaning towards their former British colonies, much like the Miss Universe organization is a little bit leaning towards their former colonies as well. That is why outside US and Venezuela, the Miss Universe countries that have the most number of winners are Puerto Rico and the Philippines, who have been territories of the United States in the past and even in the present. Much like I believe in Miss World, where if you look at their number of winners, majority of the winners are from India and countries like Jamaica and South Africa, where these countries have largely been under British colony. Okay. AJC 8604 is asking, as Carolina's extended reign as Miss World was considered as pageant is dying, or just too much postponement because Miss Universe, Miss World, because okay, ulitin ko. Carolina's extended reign at Miss World was considered as pageant is dying, or just too much postponement because Miss World to drag into pageants is dying syndrome. Okay, I'm kind of confused. But I think the reason why Carolina's extended reign was because they don't have a country to hold the pageant in. It's simple as that. And if you don't have a country that is willing to sponsor your pageant, ang hirap mag-invest ng maghirap mag-invest on your own, especially with Miss World, that I don't think there is money that can be earned if it is being held in London or held in in the United Kingdom. So I think it was just a mere coincidence that after the pandemic, Miss World has been struggling quite they've been struggling in such a way that it's so difficult to find relevance for them. in when it comes to to holding their pageants, because they are at the mercy of whoever is they're partnering with in terms of hosting. So I think that's the reason why. AJC continues, but at 71, the 71st Miss World, 13 girls from Africa made it to the top 40, but only Botswana made it into the final cut. Again, pageants have certain, certain leanings towards their former colonies, especially for British and American pageants. So maybe it's just that. Okay? Now, to close up this conversation, let's check muna yung votes when it comes to the poll. There is 3% of you who believes that pageantry is dead. There's 13% who thinks that pageantry is thriving. There's a huge majority saying that pageantry is dying at 37%. And 47% of you thinks that pageantry is barely surviving. And to be honest, I think that if it was up to me to answer this poll, I think that pageantry is barely surviving nowadays. And this is something that needs to be addressed. And I think, again, it all rolls back to the question of what makes pageantry still relevant in today's society. And if we are able to, to answer that collectively as a community, and answer that with, with conviction and with confidence, then we might find our way back to being relevant. And I do hope that this question is something that pageant owners, whether they are small or large organizations, are able to answer in the future, because it cannot come from the fandom. It has to start from the pageant organizations first before it can roll down to the fandom and the communities that supports the pageant industry. We need to remind ourselves that not only are we shrinking in terms of market size with Latin America and Asia, but in terms of age as well. The people who have largely supported pageants are now aging. And Gen Z is a very difficult market to get involved into, because they have a very different perspective on what constitutes as relevant, or what constitutes as important in today's society. I think the last generation that is fully engaged with pageantry is the people who were born in the 1980s, the older millennials. And if we keep on looking at pageantry as a source of entertainment, not a community, then we are doomed. So we really need to find ways and find reasons why this is still an industry that is worth supporting and relevant to our daily lives. And I am hoping that as we continue to discuss and continue to converse about difficult topics like this, we really need to find ways that the people who are investing on pageantry are not looking at it as at a shallow perspective, but rather looking at it from a business perspective, who have a deeper understanding of the world, so that this community will thrive. Kasi if we are just relying on very shallow interpretation of pageants, and we just see it as a competition for women, women against women, camps against camps, individuals versus other individuals, then this will not have a healthy future ahead of it. So we really need to dig deep, and be more intellectual and more cerebral in the way that we tackle pageantry in the future, because when it comes to the changes in the industry, we really need to have foresight rather than afterthoughts. when it comes to the future of this industry. Okay, reading some last minute na mga comments here. Fortita says TikTok is a lot more relevant than pageantry to the new eras of Becky's. The Daniel P. Yuson Jr. says, I love this live session. Thanks, Sir Jason. Para tuloy akong nag-attend ng pageant class. God bless. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for everyone who have joined us in our live stream this evening. Please leave a like, leave a thumbs up, and for those who are new here, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and let's grow this channel together, because the more people who are involved in this industry and in this, in pageantry as a whole, and the more intellectual that we approach pageantry, the more cerebral and thought-provoking that we handle pageants as a whole, I think that would be helpful to the overall health of the industry. So thank you very much for everyone who has patiently joined us in our live stream, and I do hope to see you again in the future for our next live stream discussion. I am making some arrangements for a recorded content a little bit later this week, but I do hope that sometime around Saturday we have another live stream discussion or a recorded content coming out. Okay, so thank you very much everyone, and I hope to see you again in our next live stream. Ingat po tayo dahil mainit ang panahon here in the Philippines. There's the heat index is in the 40s, so please keep yourselves hydrated para healthy tayo in our next kita-kits in our live stream in this channel. Thank you very much, and good evening everyone. Bye, see you again soon.